What's going on, guys? Super Insane 18 here, and I just realized that I actually have not yet brought you guys a post-Duelist Nexus Purrely deck profile. Of course, there was the Purrely Sprite deck profile that I went undefeated with at my local sneak peek event, but this is actually a very different deck because there are no sprites, meaning that we're not going to be playing the same ratios of cards, and some cards we're not going to be playing all together, so let's go ahead and show you guys the build. So, of course, we are going to be kicking things off with 3 copies of the Purrely, followed by 3 copies of the Purrely. This is just standard. These are the only Purrely main deck monsters, and while this is a very standard ratio, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I've considered playing less than 3 of the regular Purrely, just because of the fact that I whiff on it all the time. For those of you that don't know, whiff essentially means missing the effect. There are so many times where I will reveal 3 cards off of the base Purrely and not see anything that is even remotely usable, and it just feels really bad. So probably not a smart idea to cut it down, but it is definitely something that I have considered, so I just wanted to throw that out there since it has been, you know, kind of just rolling around in my mind a little bit. But that is it for the actual Purrely monsters. Then the remainder of the monsters in the main deck are just going to be hand traps. We have 3 copies of Effect Veiler, and I want to talk about this one a little bit because a lot of people are actually playing Ghost Mourner, and I do think that specifically for Purrely, Effect Veiler is the better hand trap. Now, Ghost Mourner is probably better for the format as a whole, because, you know, you can't really use Effect Veiler if your opponent has something like Arise Heart already established, or if you're under Shifter, but for the fact that it is not only a level 1, but a light as well, it just kind of synergizes with the Purrely archetype a little bit better than something like Ghost Mourner would. There have been scenarios where I've actually normaled this and used it to go into something like Relinquished Anima, or something like a Sky Striker Ace Azalea, because again it is a light, or just flat out overlay it with one of the Purrelys for a rank 1, and I think that is very important because all of your Purrely spells are essentially E-Tellies, so having this as a backup plan as a summon is actually pretty strong. Then we have the 3 copies of Dueling Lockbird. If you are not playing Dueling Lockbird this format, you are not playing this format. This card is absolutely insane and can sometimes just auto-win games outright on its own. And then we have our 3 copies of Ash Blossom, just the most generic hand trap. You're not going to be really doing anything with it on its own, but pairing it with the other hand traps that we're playing, it can definitely put in work if you have something else to back it up. Then on to the spells. We are playing 3 copies of Sleepy Memory with the release of Duelist Nexus. Sleepy Memory is probably the best memory that you have because you can now use it to go into the copy of E-Purrely Nor, which we will talk about when we get to the extra deck. 3 copies of Pretty Memory, 3 copies of Happy Memory, and of course our 1 Delicious. We are maxing out on the absolute most copies of the memories that we can play. Delicious unfortunately is limited to 1, so we do only have 10 instead of 12, but it's still mandatory that you max out on all of these. They are all E-Tellies, they all have incredible effects, you don't really need to say much else. We have 3 copies of My Friend Purrely. This is probably overall the best card in the deck as a whole, just because of the amazing utility that it can provide you. Not only are you able to add a Purrely memory to your hand every single turn, but if your opponent outs any of your XYZ monsters, you can recur 3 from the graveyard, and it just offers you a ton of ability to continue playing through the game. This isn't really a game that is going to win immediately. Sometimes you go into the grind game, despite the fact that there is a happiness OTK. There are a lot of times where you do get into that grind game, so My Friend Purrely really helps. Next up, we have 3 copies of Stray Purrely Street. This is another card that some people might not play 3 of, but I think that if you are playing a pure Purrely strategy, it is absolutely mandatory to play at 3. It has 3 effects, all of which are absolutely insane in their own right. You can, when it's on the field, your opponent cannot target special summoned Purrely monsters the turn that they were special summoned, meaning that anything you summon off of your memories or any XYZs that you summon are immune to effects that would target. Then you also have the effect to attach a Purrely memory to a face-up Purrely XYZ during the end phase, which can allow you to do some insane things like the draw 6 combo during your opponent's turn. And finally, if your opponent outs a Purrely XYZ that is face-up on your field, it summons a Purrely from your deck, giving you some recursion as well as follow-up for the next turn. Then for non-engines, we have 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. As long as Kashtira is the best deck, this is probably the best spell card in the game, just because the effect of Arise Heart is mandatory, so they will have to activate it at some point during your main phase if you are attempting to play the game, and this can just get you exactly where you need to go by taking the Arise Heart, slapping a Zeus on top, or drawing 2 if you need it. It just really depends, but this card is just crazy. We have 3 Book of Moon. A long time ago, a good friend of mine told me that Book of Moon was the best neg one in the game, and honestly, he's 100% right. I will 100% always play this card moving forward, unless the format changes so drastically. Book of Moon is just outright an insane card. Then onto the traps, we have our 1 Purrely Eep. A lot of people might consider playing this at 2. Personally, I've never had to need to come up, but I can definitely understand it, especially for the grind games. And finally, just a little bit more of the hand traps. We have 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. That is the main deck at 40 cards. Let's show you guys the extra. And before we get into the extra deck, I just want to remind you guys that the Fusion Summer Fun double-sided Metal Field Center is still available for purchase on my website, insanetcg.com, link in the description down below. Just because the summer is almost over doesn't mean that the fun has to be. It is a limited run of just 100, and they are almost out, so make sure you pick yours up before they're gone. Now, the extra deck for this deck is pretty standard, and most people's are going to be card for card identical, but there is one flex spot in particular that I'll talk about when we get there. So starting things off, we have our 2 copies of Purrely Beauty. This card is just really good not only as an effect negate, but by being able to essentially just steal cards your opponent controls by attaching them to it as material, as long as it has the pretty underneath it, which it always will because it's required to be able to make it. Then we have our 2 copies of Happiness. This is kind of just an OTK button. If your opponent has any monster with 2,000 or less attack on, or actually less than 2,000 because you need to be able to not suicide into it, you need to be able to keep swinging, and this is what lets you do it. It can attack for every happy underneath it, and then it'll search cards. You search the Delicious, make their monster not able to be destroyed, and you keep halving it, and you just keep swinging, so it's just an OTK button. Then we have our 1 copy of Purrely Nor. This is the brand new card out of the Duelist Nexus set, and this is what allows you to really play off of a minimal number of cards, because when you use its effect to suck up one of the quick plays, it can set a Purrely trap from your deck, meaning that you will more often than not always have your way into the Eep, which in turn turns into the Big Nor as well. We have our 1 copy of Plump, just because we only have 1 copy of Delicious. You would play more if we had more Delicious, but unfortunately we don't. We have our 2 copies of Purrely Nor. This is the boss monster of the deck. Not only can it be unaffected if it has 5 or more materials, but not once per turn you are able to spin cards your opponent controls or in their graveyard to the bottom of the deck as a quick effect. So sometimes you can make a really big Nor and just win off of that. At tournament the other night, I actually had this with 8 material, so that equated to 4 bounces, and that was just way too much for my opponent to play through. We have a Zeus package of Slacker and Downward Magician. This is just the best way to go into our double Zeus. Then onto the Xyz monsters, we have the Link monsters, my apologies. We have our 1 copy of the Relinquished Anima, and of course the 1 copy of Skytraker Ace Azalea. This is just a really good card to be able to make if your opponent like de-barriers you or something, or sometimes they might just have a Floodgate or something that you need to get out of, and this is a good way to do it. Now, the final 15th slot is the Flex spot, and I've chosen to play IP Masquerena. Some people might play Donner, some people might play the Lyrilusk, or not the Lyrilusk, yeah, some people actually might play the Lyrilusk XYZ, but the one that I was thinking of is the Sylvan Princess Sprite. The reason I choose to play IP Masquerena is we are seeing a very high uptick in the play of Contact C, which unfortunately this deck has absolutely no out to, because you can't make either Anima or the Azalea with the Contact C, and none of our XYZ monsters are able to be used to make it either, so this is the best way to get out of it. And the reason I like IP over something like Donner is because on your opponent's turn, you can then use it to make an Azalea, which will turn into another form of interruption, so it just kind of lets you play around it when you otherwise normally wouldn't be able to. And there you guys have it. That is going to be my pure Purrely deck profile for the post-Duelist Nexus format. A lot of people are saying that this is the current best deck. Some people still think that Kashtira is. Personally, I'm undecided. I'm not a huge fan of the current format, as I've told you in plenty of other videos, but I definitely think that this is one of the top contenders moving forward, especially if you look at the last 2 weekends, which are the first 2 weekends of the new season after Worlds. You can see that Purrely has a very high representation and win rate as well, arguably more than Kashtira if you look at the statistics, but that is a video for another day. If you liked it, you know the deal. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like, comment, share with your friends, and thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.